Hey guys, what's up? Dingo Crikey here with a review of Transformers Robots in Disguise episode 19. So episode 19, titled The Champ, obviously has something to do with fighting in a ring. And a lot of times shows will have one of two approaches to these kind of episodes. Either you'll have one of your characters kind of feeling like they're all tough, and then they go into the ring and they get beat down and they have some serious discussion with another character. Then they go in there and learn some big lesson as they take on their opponent. Or you have something that's just kind of a fun episode with a lot of ruckus. And Robots in Disguise took the latter approach, which I'm actually pretty happy about, because though I like some of the more serious moments we've gotten from Robots in Disguise as we had in episode 18, I prefer them handling an episode like this as they did, because otherwise it would probably end up being kind of corny. So the episode, for what it was a fun episode. We got to see a lot of action, a lot of different characters getting different levels of focus. Obviously, humor was a big emphasis in this episode, and as with this show, that can kind of go either way, good or bad. But I think the main cons for this episode come from the fact that the first half is really slow, and there's a lot of stuff that we really don't need to see to get the point of the episode across. For one, we basically have two whole fights in the ring before we see Grimlock versus Ground Pounder, and I didn't really feel like that was necessary. I mean, it's kind of the format for these whole fighting in the ring kind of episodes, and it kind of developed Ground Pounder, but I think they spent way too much time on it. But all they really needed to do was show Ground Pounder a little bit, the fact that he's a cheater, and show how they make it into the ring without humans suspecting they're giant alien robots. In contrast to that, which was kind of boring other than watching things smash each other, the time spent with the Autobot characters in this episode is really fun to watch, especially the whole Fix-It and Grimlock thing. There's where I wish they would have put a little bit more focus on the characters at the base, kind of preparing Grimlock for this fight. Yeah, it would have kind of felt like filler, but it would have been a lot more enjoyable, especially for this type of episode. And speaking of that, I did like how they pulled it off that Grimlock was the only one who could be there to fight Ground Pounder. It's cool to see how they're kind of working this in with some of the bigger aspects of the story, such as the ground bridge and the fact that it wasn't really working, hence the Autobots get sent somewhere else and that they couldn't take Grimlock on the mission originally. It didn't feel contrived, and I think they made the best of it. Even like where Bumblebee puts Denny in charge of the characters at the base because he's the closest thing to an adult, and then Drift makes his comment. That's the kind of humor I really like in this show, especially from characters like Drift, when they do the kind of subtle stuff that isn't right there in your face. The show's actually pretty good at doing that, so it would be nice if they put more of a focus there on like subtle comments by Drift and other characters rather than just the repetitive Fix-It jokes and Bumblebee, that kind of thing. Though outside of Fix-It's glitching, he is really cool to see in this episode. Yeah, they do follow that trope where the seemingly most innocent character is the one who likes watching robots beat the crap out of each other for entertainment, but it does kind of make sense. I mean, think of someone like Fix-It, he can't really fight or anything, so this is kind of how he enjoys it, which I guess I can't say he can't fight. We do see some of that later on in the episode, which was kind of cool. And we've seen him even teaching Grimlock a few things, and they kind of overdid that point. But overall, I can say I enjoyed Grimlock and Fix-It's interaction in this episode. It definitely isn't the most prominent character interaction that the show has to offer, but I still think it's enjoyable to watch, and that is one of the things I like about Robots in Disguise, is that each of the main Autobots, with the exception of Drift at this point and his minicons, have a unique relationship with each of the other cast members, which has been absent from far too many Transformers cartoons. Take one like Transformers Armada, for example. Most of the Decepticons were pretty good when it came to interactions, though they probably could have had a little bit more time with them. As far as the Autobots go, there were a few significant ones such as Smokescreen and Hotshot, who everyone kind of had their unique way of dealing with those characters, such as Smokescreen, whether it was Smokescreen and Blur, Smokescreen and Scavenger. Those interactions were each slightly unique. But what about an interaction like Scavenger and Jetfire? It's one we hardly seen in the show, and from what we did see of it, it really wasn't that interesting. It's like they basically just filled in the lines for these characters without having any... We also seen that with Transformers Cybertron. Now, they did seem to make more of an effort, but their problem was a little bit more in the fact that they had such a big cast. Maybe in that case you could use the size of the cast to justify it. Personally, I prefer smaller cast with more well-developed characters than a ton of characters, but that's a matter of opinion. Anyways, I do like how Robots in Disguise is giving us those interactions. I think over time even Drift will build that, and probably the Decepticons too. We're already seeing some of that. So, it's really cool to see. Going back to this episode though, let's look at some of the other characters in the episode. I mean, the rest of the Autobots, yeah, they do have a good amount of time, but they're not in there a ton. Obviously, Drift and Bumblebee have some interaction, as Drift still is a new cast member. Other than Fix-It and Grimlock, we get a lot of time with Russell and Denny. I didn't mind it as much in this episode. I thought it kind of made more sense, the stuff they did have in there. Denny's kind of grown on me as the show has went on. He can still be really annoying, but he is a fun character to have there. Russell, yeah, his role in this episode wasn't the worst, but he was definitely in there more than he needed to be. Ground Pounder and Headlock, they're just like one episode characters. Maybe they'll appear down the road, but they weren't too interesting. For their roles, I thought they played it out pretty well. They're kind of stereotypical, but I did enjoy seeing them. I thought they had much better designs than some of the other Decepticon characters. Definitely not as cool as ones like Steeljaw or Thunderhoof, but glad they weren't as weird as some of the others. Especially Headlock's design, I did really like his. As far as characters go, I really think the worst parts were all of the time with the extra human characters. Just didn't feel like that was necessary. Seeing the host was kind of funny, but even him, they spent a little bit too much time on him. As far as highlights of the episode, for this one, it's definitely the action. I really enjoyed the fight scenes in this one, and I think the action in the show has really picked up on just being a lot better. The show was never bad with it, but now we're seeing a lot more camera angles, more brutal fighting between the Transformers. Of course, this episode was a lot more brutal than probably the future ones will be, but still really cool. A few scenes that stood out are like when he throws Grimlock to the edge of the ring and then Grimlock bounces off that and comes spinning towards him, or when Ground Pounder would have his fireball, the whole move there. A lot of that stuff was really cool. Some other things, I mean, this episode, unlike a lot of the other ones, didn't really seem to try to get any message across, but I don't think that's a bad thing since a lot of this show's messages are, not that great, and it's not a bad thing to have a change, and this episode definitely helped do that. So, final thoughts. This episode was a pretty good one. I definitely enjoyed it. The action sequences, the character interactions. However, it was a little slow to start, and there was a lot of stuff that felt like filler throughout the episode. If you want to be really critical, you could say that the story for this one was pretty weak as well, but I would probably rate this one at about a 7 out of 10. It's an enjoyable, fun episode, but it's a little bit slow at parts, and it doesn't bring a ton to the table to give it an 8 out of 10, or certainly not a 9 out of 10 rating. Anyways, that's just my thoughts on it. You guys can leave yours in the comment section below. Did you enjoy this episode? What do you think of the new Decepticons? Do you agree that while the quality of the show as a whole hasn't really leveled up the way we might have liked to have seen, the action sequences and some other things have definitely picked up. Leave it in the comment section below, along with any topic suggestions you might have on Robots in Disguise, Transformers 5, Combiner Wars, whatever it might be. Drop it off in the comment section below. I have gotten a good amount of suggestions recently, and I do plan on doing some of those, so keep an eye out for some of your topics. And that's all I have to say for this one. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Transformers news and commentary, and have a good one, guys. See you soon.